Hello guys, and glad to have you on board again today. Right before we get into the actual technical stuff, I felt like I had to do something in between just to avoid wasting some time later on those purposes. So here we go. Today we're going to talk about how to eventually replace or make some correlations to all of the stuff that I will be sharing later on when we'll get to the actual technical patterns and stuff like that. Because of course these things and this series of video has meant not to be just a gurus type of stuff, bringing you back into my indicators and stuff like that. I definitely want to share the knowledge so you guys can actually use it with different structures, different indicators, different stuff. So I think there is valuable information out there that everyone can profit from, not just the guys who are using my indicators and stuff like that. Okay, so this is what today's podcast is going to be about. I'm going to show you what I think is one of the best possible ways to replicate some of the things I'll share with my strategy without using my tools. So of course, there's no perfect and just any single answer. There are so many possibilities out there. So I'll just try to first of all explain the psychology behind the indicators so you can find something that eventually on your own replicates the psychology of it in a doable way. And I'll give you what I think is, on my personal vision, the closest thing I've ever found to what my indicators are doing, okay? So first thing first, I think we're going to switch to some charts because yes, today there's no necessary things to go into PowerPoints and stuff like that. We're gonna get to go right to the charts. So let's do it. Okay, all right, so just as a quick summary of what we're actually going to be talking about. So the indicators are going to use multiple things, okay? They're really complex and I definitely don't have any chance to go down the road of explaining what every single thing on this chart is because that's definitely not the goal and not the point. I suspect that at that point, if you're using the indicators, you have read the PDF manual, so you know what the fuck all of those things are. Otherwise, I sincerely suggest you just stop that video and have a look at the PDF manual. This video is basically meant to teach people who are not using the indicators what are the core information without entering too much level of detail. But the thing in here, just to go on the overall structure, what are the basic, absolutely necessary stuff that you need to get if you want to go further down the road learning my patterns. The first thing you need is basically a replication of my context, okay? So just as a quick parallel, remember what we've said on the previous videos, the context in here represents the supply and demand areas and there's evolution through time. So this is basically my risk areas, my risk speculative areas evolving through time. So you need to have something similar. But the thing in here and the actual real trick with this thing is that, just like I'll teach you later on with the strategy, nothing is simple out there. And the prospect that you have two major ways in which prices will behave. Either that is trending or that is ranging. There are also a third but less probable structure, which is excessive and bullish market behavior. But anyway, aside from this, we'll consider most of the time we're spending between trending and ranging. So you need actually to have two sets of tools because I don't know any other tool that is actually good at doing and working both ranges and trends. So that's the thing, that's the milestone I try to achieve with my indicators. Of course, this is not perfect. I'm not saying I've definitely found the best solution. There are no best solutions. It's just you try to get as close as possible to what you can achieve, and of course you adapt yourself. But definitely at that point, what you need is two sets of tools because no matter how long I searched, I've never found an indicator that is doing well, or out of the free indicators, of course, the ones that you can find for free in every trading platform, okay, the standard indicator set, there's nothing that works well on trends and ranges at the same time. So the best way out there is to use two sets of tools. So the first way in which you can replicate this thing, I think, is on trending behavior using trend channels. That's definitely the most useful and closer to what I have built in here that you'll ever found as free tool in every available trading platform. Everyone has trend channels. So this is definitely what you're going to be doing out there. using trend channels on trending context. But when you're dealing with ranging context, and actually in here I shouldn't have used the fucking S&P 500, because that's the worst possible ranging context. We're breaking supports and breaking resistances. So of course in here even my indicators are struggling like hell. And of course I would definitely say that every indicator out there will struggle into this ranging structure, because they're just so rare that no one can actually navigate these things safe and sound. These things just so rarely happen, breaking both resistances and support by still letting prices oscillating across them, which means we're still in a fucking range actually. Though in these structures, I mean, find me an indicator that's able to predict these structures, and I mean, I probably think you're bullshitting. Anyway, so trend channels or another tool for your ranging context, which is going to help you find your third range boundary. I think the best hand-charted thing you can get is the pitchfork. But we're not going to use the pitchfork in its natural state. We're going to use it into the inside bar state, which is this, okay? So a natural pitchfork would look like that, okay? An inside pitch is going to look like ranging detection, and it's going to be real great at detecting potential third range boundary areas, okay? So of course that depends on where you're putting the anchor points, and in here I would argue whether this one or this one is the one that actually matters, but you'll see that in any way, anytime the prices were dealing with these trends or with these lines, this approximate channel, every time it did, the trend channels or my context channels were dealing with the same area. So just like I said, what we care about is not to find the perfect tool. There are no perfect tool. My tools aren't perfect. This thing isn't going to be perfect. It's just that what matters is we find the same areas, because as I'll share you my patterns later on, you need to find the same speculative areas, or at least something that gets close to it. And that is by definition the best ever replicate I've found that emulates pretty well the behavior of my strategy. And actually, when I actually built my indicator, I inspired from these tools. So I tried to get something, so you get the psychology. I always try to get something that was not lagging, because a trend channel actually, I think, is most of the time not met, okay? Because basically, when you have an upside trend channel, prices are generally spending most of their time into the upper area of that thing, because markets are anticipative by nature. Remember what we said previously on the previous podcast. So most of the time on an upward trend channel, even though prices will sometimes retrace down the bottom of this channel, most of the time they're spending on the upper area. So this is the reason why I felt trend channels were good, but not adaptive enough into trends. They were trend following, but most of the time speculators anticipate those things. So what matters is I needed an acceleration factor. Though the stop and reverse indicator felt like a very good thing to start with, but very, very much too aggressive. Like, and stop and reverse would definitely do something like this, and then this, and then this, and then this. It's really too much aggressive to me. So I wanted something that wasn't that much aggressive as the stop and reverse, but wasn't so laggy as the trend channel. So this is the reason why you have something that actually behaves right in between. And you just got to understand what the fuck I try to achieve with my context boxes. My context boxes are generally on early stages behaving like trend channels until they actually detect that a trending behavior is at go, and in that perspective they're going to start behaving closer to what a SAR will do, a stop and reverse. But it's definitely not the same thing, all right? If you think I just copied the stop and reverse, no, you don't get it, right? The acceleration factors I've built are not time dependent. Basically, the stop and reverse means as long as you build a new candle, I'm going to accelerate the factor. I'm going to increase the acceleration factor. That definitely isn't the case in my indicator. There are several things that actually will increase or decrease the acceleration factor. So this is really something adaptive. I'm not going to go into the details or stuff like that, but at least you understand what I try to achieve. Something in between a trend channel and a stop and reverse. So I would say on trending behavior, if you want to replicate my tools, you can use a stop and reverse and a trend channel. But that's not just all about it. What matters in here is you guys need to understand that What's actually at place in the strategy is a multi-time frame analysis. And this is where it's going to be tricky, because if you guessed what I've said in the first place, you're going to need two sets of tools. You're going to need your range tools and you're going to need your trend tools, but you're going to need to play with these on 2 time frames and update them as prices evolve. So you're going to have to manually do that stuff. That doesn't mean you won't do it well. You have to learn how to do it well, but once you do, you'll have a very efficient stuff, but you have to end draw all those things. That's the downside of it. You have to manually do this, but once it's settled and once it's on the charts, it will work just as fine as any automatically plotted indicator. Even I would say if you do it well, it's even going to be slightly better, because indicators have their downside. They're plotting things automatically for you, but at some point, they don't necessarily react the way I wanted them to, because algorithms are not perfect. Sometimes they don't fit the plan and they barely get to activate a pattern, but they just don't, and it radically changed the way the indicator behaves later on. So yeah, sometimes I disagree with what the indicators are showing me, because I wish they would do it differently, but that's the downside of everything. Okay, so hand plotted stuff, if you do it well, normally is going to work even better than the indicators. But the problem is you have to do it well, which is not necessarily easy, and specifically for beginners. And secondly, I mean, no room for error. If you place it in the wrong place, that's not going to work. You're going to have to update, which means you got to go into your charts, and specifically in short-term time frames, that can be fairly time-consuming, but still works fine. Okay, so multi-time frame, you need to do it on 2 time frames, which means if you're using a trend channel based reading, like assessing this is a trend, what you would be doing is, for example, you would draw this trend channel, and that will give you the position of this trend channel replicate. So you'll see that's highlighting the same area anyway. Okay, and you would do into the trending into the context, the larger time frame, you would use these 2 low points, all right, down to this high point, and you would get this. So you would know, okay, I'm trading on top of the previous channel, I pulled back on it, and right now I'm trading at the bottom of the short-term trend channel. So this is how you will get to find this anchor point. And these patterns, I'll explain them the same way using my tools. I'll say, okay, we had a resistance area in here, prices decide to fuck it all up, they've been trading the trend channel pullback, so now let's get to try buy that shit. Okay, that's one of many patterns we would use. Of course, that would just say we have a speculative area out there. That doesn't mean we buy it. And this is where the second part of that video just rolls in. As you get your speculative areas, you're going to have to define whether or not you're going to be trading in them, and that simply cannot be just an on-off switch. Just like, okay, I'm fine to go, or maybe not. Okay, so it's going to be shaded gray area in here, because that is risk management. And risk management cannot be an on-off switch. It has to be shaded gray area, or at least multiple shades of gray. So what we care about in here is that we're going to need a set of tools. So I'm going to go straight to the point in here and go right to the conclusion. I've searched the magical Saint Grail, whatever, for years. I definitely spent years looking for those things, and I definitely wasted that time. So just don't waste yours. I'll get you to give you the most appropriate structure I've found so far in years of experience, using a momentum indicator with a cyclical indication to filter it out, because just a momentum indicator definitely isn't working fine. I can't stress that enough. I've seen so many people using just RSI as a trigger point. Fuck that, that simply doesn't work. I've seen people using RSI and saying, all right, I need a little something on top of this, eventually using stochastics most of the time. Jesus, that doesn't work out this way. These things are so close one to another in terms of mathematical behavior that you're actually just seeing something that is a little bit more aggressive but very close to what the other is doing as well. So that doesn't work out. You cannot add up things that basically calculate in the same way. So you can use multi-time frame RSI. I've seen these things, and that's pretty great, I would say. At least that's better. You're still using the same mathematical calculation, but you're using it into 2 different time frames. So that makes sense of adding up those informations, and I would totally agree with that. But definitely by far the best thing is to use cycles and momentum. You can use it multi-time frame if you want to. That's actually what I do. I'm using the higher time frame sine wave with the local momentum as my personal favorites, but there are multiple configurations and there are endless possibilities. And even my indicators will give you so many options. Okay, you can use momentum if you like it. You can use the RSI, TSI, stochastic CSI, whatever. You use the one you like. The rule in here is just pick one. Just stop switching. That is the worst thing to do. Remember the first video we've made? If you're switching stuff and starting all over again, you're basically destroying what you previously learned and starting all over again on top of it. Or down to zero. So this is really a process of creation, destroy, so that doesn't work. Don't go destruction. Just try to build something. And in order to do it, you need to actually learn the tool you're getting to. So if you decided that was RSI, because God knows why this is the one you favor, just go down this road. Learn how to use RSI. The job is on your end. The indicator is not necessarily going to adapt to you. You have to adapt to it. So first things first, I would say, learn the indicator you're using, whether this is mine or RSI or whatever. Learn your patterns, learn to master them, learn to detect them, and finally, learn to filter them with a cyclical activity. The best way you can do it is to use the good old, years ago, this thing was pretty kind of a hidden secret stuff, whatever. Just a few traders were using cycles. Nowadays, sine waves have become very well known. So this is what I'm talking about. You can use any of the available sine waves out there. Just pick one, okay? Oh Jesus, okay, this one is really harsh. But that's basically what we're dealing with, okay? So learn how to use sine wave. Just to document yourself over the web, plenty of documentation regarding sine wave usage and stuff like that, how it works, what it represents, how to filter signals with that. That is what you need to achieve. I'm definitely not going down this road in here, which takes ages to do this. For those who are using it with my indicators, you got plenty of information in the PDF manual, so no double information out there. But combining momentum and a cyclical activity is by far the best way you can do it. If you want to do it multi-time frame, that can provide an even better risk management, but that is something that you need to adjust as you already mature the strategy. Remember that, and remember what we've said, out of 2 to 3 years, and when you totally master the strategy and the tools and stuff like that, this is where you can start tweaking some stuff, mixing up things and making your own mixture out there, okay? Just don't do it in the beginning. Just try to choose something and get to adapt to it rather than thinking that things have to adapt to you. That's definitely not how it works, okay? I think at that point, we've said more than enough, so let's switch to conclusion. Okay, so the core information in here that you actually really need to understand in here, because that's the essential stuff. My thing, definitely not the only way of using these things and use my strategy. My strategy actually has a psychology. All you need is just to admit it and to find something that is close to what I've made. The easiest, and I think the closest thing I've ever found, is to use trend channels on trending behavior and to use inside pitchforks into ranging context and specifically to highlight your third range boundary speculative area, okay? So try to juggle between the two, and if you have troubles figuring out whether or not you're in a trend, that is another topic. I'll try to explain that and make the parallel here a little once in a while. But basically, when you're breaking trend channels multiple times in a row, means you're in a range, and you better like to switch to your ranging tools and use your pitchforks rather than using your trend channels, okay? So breaking multiple trend channels should be a sign that range is down the corner, okay? Use this on a multi-time frame based thing. If you're using it on a single time frame, this is not going to work with the patterns I'll teach you later on. Most of these patterns use multi-time frame analysis, okay? So you have to replicate that. So you don't build just one trend channel in a chart, you're gonna have to build two. And sometimes, this is where it gets trickier, you're gonna have to build a pitchfork and a trend channel at the same time, because your context will be on a trending behavior, but the short term will most likely be ranging. So when these things happen, just have to adapt, okay? How you're going to differentiate the trending behaviors and the ranging behaviors, I'll try to give you a few examples when we'll get to actually talk about the patterns and try to sometimes a little once in a while make the parallels for guys who are not using the indicators. But you have to understand that basically that comes from a reading from momentum and cyclical activity. If you're breaking trend channels and if your momentum is skyrocketing, or at least feel like it's glued to the top area, and basically you've seen cycle behaving this way, you know you're dealing with a fucking trend. Whether you like it or not, at that point you're going to have to use trend channels rather than using pitchforks, because basically the pitchforks will be totally pointless, okay? Another way... No, I think I'm good with that. So anyway, that's the thing we do. Regarding the signal indicator, really combine a momentum indicator with a cyclical filtering. Best way is to use the sine wave, either the core formula or some of the derivatives. You just basically gamble out there. Just try some, feel like if you see one that basically suits you most than the other, just take it and get to learn out of it. That's definitely the best way you can actually learn. Combine these two provides a very, very nice risk management. You're going to have to learn those tools, which means a little bit of hard work on your end. I've pre-made that job on my indicators, but if you can't afford them, definitely gonna have to work your way into this. What you need is to find a set of patterns, at least 2 or 3 signals. So for momentum, the classical ones are overbought pattern, divergence, all of those things. So try to get at least a list of multiple signals, at least 2 or 3. That's really a bare minimum out there. So you can take overbought, oversold cluster, you can take standard divergence and hidden divergence. At least I would say it's a bare starting minimum, okay? Regarding cyclical activity, it's real simple. You need to figure out whether the market is cyclically in trend or in range. In terms of sine wave, normally the documentation you'll find available in the web should teach you how to read that over your indicator. That being said, I think we've got more than enough. So you've got things to replicate how I found my speculative areas using either your trend channels or your pitchforks. There are multiple other options actually. You can use volatility-based reading using Bollinger Bands. Some people use trend following using super trends and stuff like that. What I care about is you guys get a supply area, demand area, and think these things evolving through time. So Keltner channels do the job. Just try to learn what you're using. Okay, if you're using something you don't understand, that simply isn't going to work. Okay, so just like you need to learn my tools if you want to use them, learn the tools you want to use if you want to use some replicates. Okay, that being said, see you guys in the next one.